Every Sunday, without fail, Amelia Rowe sat at the corner table by the window of Rosemary's Cafe, a small, quiet spot nestled near the Brighton seafront. The cafe itself was modest: wooden floors, chalkboard menus, a bell that jingled sweetly when the door opened. But to Amelia, it was the place where her heart returned week after week. She always arrived at 10:30 in the morning. The staff knew her routine by heart: 2 cups of English breakfast tea, 1 croissant with a pat of butter, and a small white vase with fresh daffodils if the florist had them that week. One of the cups of tea was never touched. She'd place it across from her, as though saving a seat for someone who was running late. Always late. Some customers speculated: an old flame, a lost husband, or a son gone abroad. But none dared ask. Amelia was warm, polite, and always smiling, but she wore sadness like a brooch, quietly and with dignity. What no one knew, not even Nathan, her only son, was that the cafe held a promise. A memory. A day she could never forget. Back in London, Nathan Rowe had no idea his mother still did this. To him, Brighton was a sleepy seaside town filled with memories he'd buried long ago. He rarely called. Work at the estate firm consumed his weeks, and the idea of his mother growing older seemed too distant, too inconvenient to confront. She had raised him alone, gently, but firmly, and while he appreciated her strength, he had never truly understood her silence. That Sunday morning, like all others, Amelia placed the second cup down. She looked at the door. She waited. And outside, the sea churned as if echoing something unsaid. The salty breeze from the English Channel swept through the open window, stirring the pages of an old book on the table next to Amelia. She glanced up briefly and smiled at the familiar sound of the cafe door jingling as a new customer entered. Despite the steady rhythm of daily life around her, her mind was far away, lost in a memory that refused to fade. Years ago, before Brighton had become her refuge, Amelia had lived a very different life in London. She was young then, full of hope and dreams, married to a man named Thomas. Their love had seemed unbreakable at the time, a promise of a future together, of building a family and a home. But life, as it often does, took a cruel turn. Thomas was a man of ambition, chasing a career that left little time for his family. Slowly, the warmth in their home grew cold. Arguments replaced laughter, and silence swallowed the space between them. When Nathan was born, Amelia had hoped for a fresh start, a chance to heal what was broken. But Thomas's absence deepened. His visits home became rare, his promises hollow. One cold winter evening, after a particularly painful fight, Thomas left. The door slammed behind him, and he never returned. Amelia was left alone, with Nathan in her arms and an empty house filled with shadows of the past. Brighton had seemed a distant dream then, but it became a sanctuary, a place where she could rebuild her life and raise her son far from the echoes of that broken marriage. Every Sunday morning, she would sit in the cafe, remembering the days when things were simpler, and waiting for the happiness she believed could still come. Across town, Nathan was unaware of the full depth of his mother's pain. His own life was busy, filled with meetings, deadlines, and ambitions. He sent a text message now and then, a quick, "Happy Sunday," or "Hope you're well," but never stayed long enough to really connect. Today was different. As Amelia sipped her untouched cup of tea, her phone vibrated softly. A message from Nathan: "We'll visit next weekend. Miss you." A small smile broke through her reserved expression. She tucked the phone away, feeling a glimmer of hope. Yet, deep inside, she wondered if it would be enough. Could the years of silence and distance be bridged by a single visit? Could the son she raised alone truly understand the sacrifices she had made in silence? The cafe grew busier as mid-morning approached. Regulars came and went, exchanging pleasantries and sharing snippets of their own lives. Amelia remained quietly observant, a steady presence in a world that was always changing. At the corner of the room, an elderly man watched her with kind eyes. He was a widower, someone who had witnessed decades of life's hardships and joys. He approached her gently and said, "You remind me of my late wife, sitting here every Sunday. Waiting for someone, perhaps?" Amelia nodded, eyes glistening but voice steady. "Waiting for a chance to heal," she replied softly. The man smiled knowingly and took his seat nearby. For a moment, they shared the silent understanding that comes from pain and perseverance. Outside, the sea continued its endless dance, waves crashing against the pebbled shore. Amelia closed her eyes, breathing in the cool air, feeling both the weight of the past and the fragile hope of what was yet to come. After that Sunday at the cafe, Amelia returned home to her modest flat overlooking the bustling streets of Brighton. The walls were lined with photographs, faded images of Nathan as a baby, family holidays at the coast, and moments of laughter frozen in time. Yet beneath these snapshots lay secrets Amelia had long kept locked away. Weeks later, as Nathan's promised visit drew near, Amelia found herself rummaging through an old wooden chest in the corner of her living room. Dust floated in the dim light as she lifted the heavy lid, revealing a stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. They were letters she had written but never sent. Letters addressed to Thomas, letters filled with hopes, apologies, and heartache. She ran her fingers over the brittle paper, remembering the nights spent writing, only to fold them back up and place them away. One letter stood out, its edges worn and the ink slightly smudged. It was from the month Nathan was born, a letter filled with dreams for her son's future and a plea for Thomas to come home. Amelia sighed, a mix of sorrow and relief washing over her. Those letters were the chapters of a story no one else knew, a story of a love lost and a woman's resilience in the face of abandonment. Meanwhile, Nathan was wrapping up a busy week in London. His thoughts drifted often to his mother, the woman who had given him everything. He felt a knot of guilt tightening each time he remembered how little time he spent with her. His work, his social life, his city, all seemed to demand more than he could give. The thought of seeing Amelia again stirred a complicated mix of anticipation and apprehension. What would they say? How had she changed? And most painfully, what had he missed? On the morning of his arrival, Brighton was cloaked in a gentle mist. Nathan stepped off the train, pulling his coat tight against the cool air. The familiar salty scent of the sea welcomed him home, yet a nervous flutter settled in his stomach. Amelia prepared the flat with quiet care. The kettle boiled, filling the kitchen with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed tea. She placed a small vase of daffodils on the table, the same kind she always brought to the cafe. When Nathan knocked, the moment felt suspended in time. Their eyes met, and for a brief second, the years apart melted away. Yet beneath the surface, unspoken questions and emotions waited patiently to be uncovered. That evening, as they sat together over tea and soft conversation, Amelia hesitated before reaching for the blue ribbon on the shelf. She unfolded the letters slowly, unsure if Nathan was ready for the truths they held. The past, it seemed, was ready to speak. The soft glow of the table lamp cast a warm circle of light over the worn letters spread between Amelia and Nathan. Each one was a fragment of a life once shared, a testament to the hopes and disappointments that had shaped them both. Nathan picked up the first letter, his eyes scanning the delicate handwriting. It was dated back to a spring afternoon when Amelia was still filled with hope, just before everything began to unravel. "My dearest Thomas," the letter began, "I write to you with a heart full of longing and a wish for the days when our home was filled with laughter again." As Nathan read, Amelia watched him closely, noting the flicker of pain and recognition in his eyes. This was a side of their story he had never fully seen, the silent struggles, the nights of tears, and the moments when Amelia had begged for their family to hold together. The letters revealed a woman who had fought tirelessly for her marriage, who had sacrificed her own happiness for the sake of her son and their future. Yet despite her efforts, Thomas had drifted further away, leaving Amelia alone to pick up the pieces. There were also letters filled with quiet forgiveness, letters Amelia wrote after Thomas left, when she still hoped for reconciliation but understood the need to let go. Nathan's voice trembled as he spoke. Why didn't you ever tell me any of this? Why did you carry it all alone? Amelia took a deep breath, steadying herself. Because I wanted to protect you, Nathan. I didn't want you to see your father as a man who gave up, and I didn't want you to carry that burden. But I wish I had known, he said, eyes glistening. Maybe I could have been there for you, for us. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years pressing between them. The truth, finally uncovered, was both painful and freeing. Later, Amelia shared stories from those difficult times, how she juggled work and motherhood, how she learned to be strong when she felt weak, and how Brighton became their sanctuary. Nathan listened intently, a newfound respect growing for the woman who had shaped his life in ways he had never understood. As the evening wore on, the distance between them seemed to shrink. The past was no longer a barrier but a bridge, connecting mother and son through honesty and understanding. Outside, the mist lifted, revealing a sky painted with stars. Inside the flat, two hearts began the slow process of healing, united by the truths they had finally dared to face. Days passed since Nathan's arrival, and the atmosphere in Amelia's flat grew warmer with every shared meal and story. Their conversations stretched late into the night, slowly knitting together years of separation and misunderstanding. Yet beneath the newfound closeness lay a tension Nathan could not quite name, a secret waiting to surface. One rainy afternoon, as Amelia brewed tea, there was a soft knock at the door. Nathan opened it to find a middle-aged man standing in the hallway, soaked from the drizzle. His eyes were steady but cautious. "Hello," the man said, glancing briefly at Amelia before focusing on Nathan. "My name is David. I'm a friend of your father's." Nathan's brows furrowed. "My father? I didn't know he had friends here." David gave a small, wry smile. "Not many know. But I came because I thought you should hear something important." Amelia stepped forward, concern knitting her brow. "What is it, David?" David reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope. "This came into my hands recently. It was written by Thomas before he left Brighton, but never sent." Nathan's heart beat faster as David handed him the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakably his father's. With trembling fingers, Nathan opened the letter. Inside, he found apologies and explanations, a confession of mistakes, regrets over lost time, and a desperate hope for forgiveness. Thomas wrote about the struggles he faced, the demons he fought in silence, and the reasons behind his departure. The letter revealed a man tormented by his own failures yet desperate to make amends. Amelia read over Nathan's shoulder, tears welling up in her eyes. "He wanted you to know the truth, Nathan. Not to justify what happened but to show he never stopped caring." Nathan folded the letter carefully. "It changes everything, and yet, it leaves so many questions." David nodded. "If you want, I can help you find him. Maybe it's time for answers, real ones." Nathan looked at Amelia, then back to the rain-speckled window. The past was no longer just memories and letters. It was alive, beckoning him toward a future uncertain yet full of possibility. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains as Nathan and Amelia prepared to leave Brighton. The letter from Thomas had stirred something deep within them both, a fragile thread of hope, pulling them toward a path long avoided. Nathan packed a small bag, his movements deliberate yet heavy with anticipation. Amelia stood nearby, her eyes reflecting a mixture of anxiety and determination. "We don't know where he is exactly," she said quietly, "but David promised to help. He has contacts, people who might know." Nathan nodded. "I have to try. For me, for you, for the truth." They stepped out into the crisp spring air, the city slowly waking around them. The streets held memories, both bitter and sweet, but now they were stepping into the unknown, together. David met them at a cafe near the harbor, his presence calm but purposeful. Over steaming cups of tea, He shared what little he knew. Thomas had moved to a small village inland, seeking solitude after leaving Brighton. The trail was faint, but it was something. As they planned their journey, Nathan's thoughts raced. What would he say when he saw his father again? Would there be forgiveness? Or more heartbreak? Amelia placed a hand on his arm. No matter what happens, you're not alone. The first leg of their journey was by train, winding through rolling hills and blooming fields. The countryside was breathtaking, but Nathan's mind was elsewhere, on the man who had shaped and shattered his childhood. At the small village station, the air was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to Brighton's bustle. They found a local inn where David had arranged a room, and the three sat down to rest before the search resumed. Nathan stared out the window, the weight of the past pressing down yet mingled with the faintest glimmer of hope. This journey was more than a quest for answers, it was a chance to heal old wounds and perhaps start anew. The village seemed peaceful at first glance, with its cobbled streets and quaint cottages wrapped in climbing ivy. Yet beneath its serene surface, Amelia and Nathan sensed the presence of untold stories, whispers of the past that lingered in the quiet corners. David led them to a small community center where locals gathered. They hoped to find someone who remembered Thomas, who might offer a clue to his whereabouts. Faces looked curious but guarded as Nathan spoke about his father. One elderly woman stepped forward. Thomas? Yes, I recall a man who stayed just on the edge of town. Quiet, mostly kept to himself. But there was a sadness about him, like a storm he could not escape. Amelia felt a pang in her chest. Do you know where we might find him now? The woman shook her head slowly. No, but he left this behind. She handed over a faded photograph showing Thomas standing beside a weathered oak tree, the village church steeple in the background. Nathan studied the photo intently. The oak tree was just outside the village, a place he could visit tomorrow. As they walked back to the inn, the skies darkened and a chill wind began to blow. The shadows lengthened, and with them, the weight of memories both painful and unresolved. That night, Amelia found herself awake, staring at the ceiling, thoughts swirling. She remembered the arguments, the silences, and the broken promises. But she also recalled moments of laughter, tenderness, and the strength it took to carry on. Nathan, too, was restless. His dreams were haunted by fragmented images, his father's face blurred by time, echoes of harsh words, and the distant sound of a lullaby his mother once sang. By morning, the decision was clear. They would seek out the oak tree, confront the past, and perhaps, find the man who held their answers. The morning was crisp and clear as Nathan and Amelia made their way toward the ancient oak tree just beyond the village boundary. The air was filled with the scent of damp earth and budding leaves, a promise of new beginnings amidst the shadows of the past. As they approached, Nathan's heart pounded. The tree's broad branches stretched wide, sheltering a small bench beneath its boughs. Sitting there was a figure, an older man, his hair streaked with silver, his posture weary yet upright. Thomas looked up slowly, eyes meeting Nathan's with a mixture of surprise and hesitation. For a moment, the years between them seemed to dissolve. Nathan, Thomas said quietly. I didn't expect you to come. Nathan stepped forward, voice steady despite the flood of emotions. I needed to understand. To know why you left, why you disappeared. Thomas nodded, the weight of his absence heavy in the silence that followed. I was lost, son. Afraid. I thought leaving was the only way to protect you all, from myself. Amelia stood beside Nathan, her presence a quiet support. We've carried your absence, but we also carried hope. The conversation unfolded slowly, with Thomas sharing stories of struggle and regret, of mistakes made and lessons learned. There was no easy forgiveness, no quick resolution. But there was honesty, the foundation for healing. As the sun climbed higher, the three of them sat beneath the oak, bridging years of silence with words and tears. The past remained a complex tapestry of pain and love, but for the first time, It felt possible to weave a future together. Nathan looked at his father, then at Amelia, and breathed deeply. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it as a family, imperfect, but united.